Nicotine. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That word probably brings up images of addiction, cigarettes, danger. But what if I told you that's only half the story? Today we're going to dive into the incredible paradox of a molecule that's both a notorious villain and, believe it or not, a potential hero.
Right, so on one hand, you've got the nicotine we all know, the stuff that drives tobacco addiction, which is linked to all sorts of awful health problems. But then, on the other hand, you have this same exact molecule being seriously studied for its potential to protect our brains and maybe even treat diseases like Alzheimer's. So, how can one chemical be both of these things at once?
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll pull the molecule apart from the smoke. Then we'll get into how it actually works in our bodies. After that, we'll look at its really complicated role when it comes to viruses. And finally, we'll weigh its potential as a medicine against its very real dangers. To really solve this paradox, the first and honestly the most important thing we have to do is make one critical distinction. Nicotine is not a cigarette. We have to separate the chemical itself from that toxic cloud it's so famous for.
And what's so fascinating is if you look at history, our relationship with the tobacco plant didn't start with addiction. For centuries, indigenous peoples used it as a sacred medicine. Back in the 16th century, it was even in European medical books, as a cure for like 36 different things. It was only when cigarettes were mass-produced that the link to cancer and disease became so tragically clear.
And that gets to the heart of it, because the real danger lies in the delivery method. The science is pretty much settled on this. When you burn tobacco, you create this nasty cocktail of thousands of toxic chemicals. The vast majority of harm from smoking, it comes from those combustion products, not from the nicotine itself.
And this chart just illustrates the point perfectly. It's comparing the harmful chemicals you get from different products. I mean, just look at those huge bars for a traditional cigarette compared to everything else. It's such a stark reminder that the method, the actual burning, is the true villain here, creating all this chemical fallout that the nicotine molecule on its own doesn't.
Okay, so if nicotine isn't the main cause of all the really bad stuff like cancer, what exactly is it doing inside our bodies? Well, it turns out it acts kind of like a master key for our entire nervous system. You see, our bodies are already wired with these things called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. The easiest way to think of them is like little locks, or docking stations, and they're designed for one of our most important natural chemicals, a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. This system is absolutely fundamental. It controls everything from how we learn and focus to how our body manages inflammation.
Now let's zoom in on one specific lock, the alpha-7 receptor. This little guy is a superstar. It's a huge player in what scientists call the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, which is basically our body's built-in emergency brake for a runaway immune response. When this alpha-7 pathway isn't working right, it's linked to everything from brain fog to autoimmune problems. It's also critical for just thinking clearly.
So here's where nicotine comes in. Its secret power is its shape. It's so similar to our natural acetylcholine that it fits perfectly into these receptor locks. And when it unlocks that alpha-7 receptor, it can set off a whole chain of events. It can tell immune cells to calm down, tamping down inflammation. In the brain, it can boost other chemicals that help us focus. It's essentially hot-wiring one of the most important regulatory systems in the human body.
So, how does this master key act when your body is fighting a virus? Well, this is where the story gets even stranger, and honestly, the science is still being fiercely debated.
You might remember this from early in the pandemic. Some researchers started noticing a really bizarre trend. For some reason, active smokers seem to be underrepresented in hospitals with COVID-19. This sparked the nicotinic hypothesis, this wild idea that nicotine might actually be protective, maybe by using those alpha-7 receptors to calm down the body's inflammatory freakout.
But hold on a second. Other research, like this study on flu in mice, found the complete opposite. It showed that nicotine actually made it harder for the body to clear the virus at the very beginning. So it might make you more vulnerable at the start of an infection, even if it helps with inflammation later on. It's a real catch-22.
So what this boils down to is that nicotine is a real double-edged sword for our immune system. On one hand, yes, it might calm down that dangerous overreaction, that cytokine storm. But on the other hand, it can also weaken our first line of defense, our body's own alarm system, which could give viruses a pretty dangerous head start. It is a really high-stakes balancing act.
So, given that smoking is so dangerous, this whole paradox has researchers asking, can we get the benefits without the burn? Could cleaner delivery methods, like patches or gums, actually be used as real medicine?
And the potential here is just tantalizing. Clinical trials using nicotine patches have shown they can improve memory and attention. There's really promising research for conditions like depression and ADHD. Not to mention, thousands of people with long COVID have reported finding relief from low-dose patches, which has kicked off a whole wave of patient-led research.
But, and this is a really big but, we absolutely cannot ignore the dangers. Nicotine is and always will be highly addictive. It can pose risks to your heart, and its impact on a developing teenage brain is a massive public health concern. So yeah, separated from smoke, it's less harmful, but it is definitely not harmless.
So, after all of that, where do we land? After weighing this incredible paradox, what's the final takeaway on this incredibly controversial molecule?
I think it really comes down to this. Nicotine is an incredibly powerful biological tool. It is not a toy. The huge challenge for science now is to figure out if we can cleverly separate its potential therapeutic value from that devastating cycle of addiction it's so famous for.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? The wisdom of ancient medicine and the very cutting edge of modern science are both pointing to something incredibly powerful here. The real question is, are we wise enough to actually figure out how to use it correctly?